One sold alcohol in a country that had banned it. The other sold cocaine to a country that could not stop wanting it. One ran his empire from a hotel suite in Chicago. The other ran his from a self-built prison in the mountains of Colombia. Both became billionaires. Both became myths. Only one of them ever surrendered. Tonight, Al Capone and Pablo Escobar, the two most powerful organized crime figures of the 20th century. Two completely different empires. One question: who was truly more dangerous? Welcome back to Evil versus Evil, Monsters of History. This is episode 9. Born in Brooklyn, New York, in 1899, Alphonse Gabriel Capone was the fourth of 9 children of Italian immigrants from Naples. His father was a barber. His mother was a seamstress. They lived in a tenement on Navy Street, surrounded by other working-class immigrant families trying to keep their children out of the gangs that ruled every block. It did not work. Al Capone dropped out of school in 6th grade after hitting a teacher in the face. By 14, he had joined the 5 Points Gang, the most powerful Italian street crew in Manhattan. By 18, he was working as a bouncer in a Brooklyn brothel, where a low-level mob soldier named Frank Galluccio slashed his face with a knife after Capone made a crude comment about Galluccio, sister. The wound left 3 long scars across the left side of his face. The newspapers would later call him Scarface. He hated the nickname. He always insisted the scars were from war wounds in France, a war he had never fought in. In 1919, just as Prohibition was about to make alcohol illegal in the United States, Capone followed his mentor, Johnny Torrio, to Chicago. The timing was perfect. A city of 3 million people had just been told it could not legally drink, and Capone was about to make sure it could anyway. By 1925, after Torrio survived an assassination attempt and retired in shock, 26-year-old Al Capone took over the Chicago outfit. He ran it like a corporation. He had accountants, he had lawyers, he had public relations men. He hosted Christmas dinners for the poor. He opened the first soup kitchens in Chicago during the Great Depression. He gave kids in his neighborhood new shoes and bought rounds for entire bars. He was, to the working-class Italian and Irish residents of Chicago, a folk hero. He bought off cops, judges, aldermen, the mayor, and several federal agents. The city of Chicago became, for nearly a decade, his personal property. The mayor of Chicago, William Hale Thompson, owed his elections to Capone money. The chief of police took weekly envelopes. The Chicago Tribune, the most respected newspaper in the city, had reporters on Capone's payroll. His business was alcohol. His tools were violence. At its peak, the outfit was earning over $100 million a year, an amount equivalent to nearly $2 billion today. He controlled every speakeasy, every distillery, every brothel, and every gambling den in Greater Chicago. On February 14th, 1929, Capone ended his greatest rival, the North Side Gang led by Bugs Moran, in one of the most infamous attacks in American criminal history. 4 of his men, 2 dressed as police officers, walked into a garage on North Clark Street, lined 7 of Moran's men against a brick wall, and machine-gunned them to death. It was Valentine's Day. The killings, never officially solved, would be known forever as the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. The federal government finally caught him not for murder, but for taxes. In 1931, Capone was convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to 11 years in prison. He served the worst of it at Alcatraz, where untreated syphilis from his early days in Brooklyn began to destroy his brain. By the time he was released in 1939, he could not finish a sentence. He had the mental capacity of a child. He died in his bed in Palm Island, Florida, on January 25th, 1947, surrounded by family. He was 48 years old. That was Al Capone, the gangster who made organized crime into a corporation. Born in Rio Negro, Colombia, in 1949, Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was the third of 7 children born to a poor farmer and a schoolteacher in the mountains of Antioquia. His family was so poor that as a child he sometimes went without shoes. According to his mother, he once told her, when he was 9 years old, that if he was not a millionaire by the time he was 22, he would kill himself. He started small. He stole tombstones from cemeteries, sandblasted off the names and resold them. He stole cars and ran a contraband operation moving cigarettes across the Colombian border. By his early 20s, he had moved up to kidnapping. By his mid-20s, in the late 1970s, he discovered the product that would make him one of the richest men who had ever lived: cocaine. The American demand for cocaine in the late 1970s and 1980s was unlike anything any drug market had ever seen. Wall Street wanted it. Hollywood wanted it. The college students wanted it. And Colombia, with its coca-friendly mountains and its weak central government, was perfectly positioned to grow it, refine it, and ship it. Escobar built the Medellin cartel. At its peak, the cartel was smuggling 15 tons of cocaine per day into the United States and controlling over 80% of the American market. Forbes magazine, in 1989, listed Pablo Escobar as the 7th richest man on Earth, with an estimated net worth of $30 billion. He owned multiple mansions. He owned a private zoo with hippos and giraffes. He owned helicopters, jets, and submarines. He once offered to pay off the entire $10 billion national debt of Colombia in exchange for legal immunity. His method was simple. He called it plata o plomo, silver or lead, a bribe or a bullet. He offered every judge, every police officer, every politician, and every journalist in Colombia the same choice. Most chose silver. The ones who chose neither chose lead. When the Colombian government refused his bribes, he declared war. He paid a bounty of $2,000 for every police officer killed in Medellin. Officers were murdered on their way home from work, in front of their families, in their own kitchens. He bombed shopping malls, he bombed police stations, he bombed government buildings. In 1989, he ordered the bombing of Avianca Flight 203, killing 110 people in an attempt to assassinate a single presidential candidate who was not even on the plane. He ordered the murders of presidential candidates, ministers of justice, Supreme Court judges, and over 600 police officers. In 1991, he negotiated his own surrender on his own terms. He built his own prison, La Catedral, on a mountaintop overlooking Medellin, complete with a soccer field, a jacuzzi, and a discotheque. He ran his empire from inside. When the Colombian government finally tried to move him to a real prison in 1992, he simply walked out. The hunt that followed was the largest manhunt in Latin American history. The United States DEA, the CIA, Colombian Search Block, and a rival paramilitary group called Los Pepes, made up of his enemies and former associates. On December 2nd, 1993, the day after his 44th birthday, Escobar was tracked to a safe house in a Medellin neighborhood and shot to death on a rooftop trying to flee. That was Pablo Escobar, the poor farm boy who built the largest criminal empire in human history. Now let us put these two empires side by side. Category 1, wealth and economic power. Capone, at his peak, earned approximately $100 million a year in 1920s money, or roughly $2 billion in modern terms. Escobar's personal net worth in 1989 was estimated at $30 billion, and his cartel grossed an estimated $420 billion over its lifetime. The edge is Escobar by a continent. Category 2, body count. Capone is connected to between 50 and 200 murders. Escobar is connected to over 4,000. The edge is Escobar, decisively. Category 3, operating range. Capone's empire was Chicago and the upper Midwest. Escobar's empire was global. Cocaine moved through Colombia, the Caribbean, Mexico, the United States, Europe, and Asia. The edge is Escobar. Category 4, political reach. Capone bought off the city government of Chicago. Escobar bought, threatened, or killed enough Colombian officials that he was, for a brief moment in 1991, effectively co-ruling the country. He held a seat in the Colombian Congress. He had a presidential candidate murdered. He built his own prison and walked out of it. The edge is Escobar. Category 5, cultural staying power. Capone has been the model for nearly every fictional mob boss in American cinema. The Godfather, Goodfellas, every gangster film owes him a debt. Escobar became the model for the modern drug lord, and Narcos made him the face of Latin American crime for an entire generation of viewers. Both are immortal. Call this category a tie. So the category split 4-0 with one tie in favor of Escobar. But categories do not capture everything. Here is the wild card. What if their eras had been swapped? Imagine Al Capone running cocaine in 1980s, Colombia. He had no instinct for warfare on Escobar's scale. He bribed. He negotiated. He played the game with a smile. He would have lasted 6 months in Medellin before being killed by a rival cartel that wanted his shipping routes. Now, imagine Pablo Escobar running alcohol in 1920s, Chicago. He would have bombed every speakeasy on the south side of his rivals within his first year, declared war on the federal government, and gotten the National Guard sent in to crush him. The empires they built were calibrated exactly to the political and legal environments they inherited. They were not interchangeable. The verdict. By the categories, Pablo Escobar wins. He was richer, deadlier, more global, and more politically dangerous than any organized crime figure in modern history. But here's the part that should disturb you. Al Capone died of natural causes in his bed at the age of 48. Surrounded by his family, Pablo Escobar died on a rooftop in his hometown, hunted by his own government with American support. The American gangster, who killed more openly and bribed more visibly, was given a quiet death. The Colombian gangster, whose product had created the addiction crisis ravaging American cities, was executed in the streets of his own country at the request of the same Americans who had been buying his cocaine for 15 years. Capone built an empire and lived to see his mind dissolve. Escobar built a kingdom and lived to see his enemies close in. The winner is Escobar. The one America keeps idolizing on film is Capone. Next episode, John Wayne Gacy versus Dennis Rader. Two killers who hid behind ordinary American lives. One was a children's clown. The other was a church president. Both murdered for decades without ever being suspected.